Hello, and welcome to my channel, Maine's Mind. So it has been a little while since I've done a book review, and I figured it's about time. You have to excuse the hair. I am fresh off of work, but I wanted to make this video. So one of the last books that I've read, it's not the last one because I'm currently reading a series, but the last book that I read was Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. And it follows the story, and this is going to have spoilers. So if you haven't read this book yet, pause, go read it, and come back. So this book is about the main character in this book is Grace Marks. I'm going to stick my little notes right here. Okay, Grace Marks. She's about 16 years old when she gets accused of murder. So what happened is her and her family are from like Ireland, I believe. And the mother dies on the way over, and she's got an abusive father who forces her to go to work as a servant in a rich household. The book, she goes to work and she meets her friend Mary Whitney. Mary Whitney is another maid that's just like really fun loving, just out there. She's kind of a little bit of a revolutionary. She's a wild child, and she kind of like really helps her out, teaches her how to handle life in general, I guess. But Mary Whitney ends up pregnant and she ends up dying. And so Grace kind of hops around for a while from job to job before she lands in this Maine house where with Nancy Montgomery. She ends up in this house and she's hoping that the relationship that she will have with Nancy Montgomery will be the same kind of relationship she had with Mary Whitney, but it doesn't turn out that way. Nancy Montgomery tends to be kind of like hot and cold. Like she's one minute she's really sweet, and the next minute she's yelling at them and, you know, degrading them and everything else. And James McDermott cannot stand Nancy Montgomery. It kind of gives you, I don't know if they were like former lovers or something, or if they just didn't like each other. I don't know exactly what their background was. It never really tells you all the way why they hated each other so much. But Nancy was just always on his case, and he hated her. Well, the whole point of this story is that, you know, Grace has been convicted of murder and she goes to prison, and she starts getting interviewed by this doctor. And this doctor is trying to interview her to study the mind. He has no interest in her as a person to begin with. He just wants to study the mind so that he can try to advance his career. His dream is to open a mental institution in the United States that is like a good, healthy environment that'll help people grow and recover. So he's traveled around the world trying to interview people and get to this point. But he meets Grace, and he's kind of confused by her. His name is Simon Jordan. And he's kind of confused by her because on one end, she's a murderess. She's in an insane asylum, and, you know, kind of a prison-ish insane asylum, but she's working as a maid in. So as he talks to her, she starts relaying this tough life to him and the whole story, and she tends to leave things out, but she, you know, it's kind of confusing because she never comes right out and tells him that she murdered these people. She tells him she doesn't remember, and as the story progresses, he kind of starts like falling for her. He at least has an attraction to her, at the very least. I mean, even the lawyer was accusing her of an attraction and like flirtatious type behavior and everything. But the way that people describe her and the way she behaves are completely different. So it's kind of a twist, because you're like, one minute they describe her as being promiscuous and flirtatious and acting like she wants these men, and then on the other end, she's this really, you know, proper young girl who doesn't understand why they're behaving this way. You know, and how she relays to him her abuse in the hospital and everything like that. And something about her vulnerability. He found something attractive about the fact that she was vulnerable. I don't know. That's at least how I took it. Anyways, he's trying to hear her story, but he can't seem to get her to remember. So he goes and hands her over to Jerome Dupont. Now, Jerome Dupont is an interesting character. He has more of a role in the book than he actually does in the movie. In the movie, he is actually Jeremiah Pantelli, who was like a, I don't know the word that they used. He was like he would bring the goods. He was like a carpetbagger kind of, he would bring goods to the houses to sell to the ladies, like buttons and scarves and shoes or whatever that it is that they needed, And at that time when he first met Grace, she was very young. She was at her first position, and she became very close with Mary Whitney and him. He even did a palm reading on her. That is her first meeting with Jeremiah. Another meeting with him is when Mary Whitney dies. She sells him the ring that Mary Whitney had so that she can cover Mary Whitney's funeral costs. Then she goes off to her assignment with Nancy Montgomery, and she has to go buy like a cart, and she's in there with this really annoying, vulgar, drunk man who's like, hey, come with me, and she's like, no, I gotta go. But he's being like really pushy with her. Well, in the movie, Thomas Kinnear walks up and punches the guy and says, is this guy bothering you? Punches him and then takes her away. But in the book, it's actually Jeremiah that goes over there and punches the guy, and around that time she's there waiting, and Thomas Kinnear shows up after the fact. But Jeremiah is the one who actually came to her aid there in the book. Time goes on, and she starts having all this trouble with Nancy Montgomery. She starts realizing that Nancy Montgomery is not the decent lady that she is, that she's actually the mistress of Thomas Kinnear. And that kind of really bothers her, that Nancy Montgomery invited her over there to be a servant with her, and that Nancy Montgomery is actually the mistress. She's not even a servant. She's a mistress. And so it bothers her that Nancy Montgomery is this mistress because it reminds her of Mary Whitney. He sees Nancy having this love affair and ends up pregnant, and all she can think about is Mary Whitney. At least that's what she kind of relays in the book, that she could see her like that. Now, anyways, later on, fast forward, he passes, Simon Jordan passes her on to Jerome Dupont. Jerome Dupont is Jeremiah. Before Jeremiah went out to the United States, he went to Grace at the house of Thomas Kinnear and asked her to run away with him. He says, this is a bad place. I'm getting bad feelings here. You should run away with me. And she's this close to doing it. She's this close to running off with him. But she wants to marry him. She wants to be a proper woman. And he's like, why? We'll just be together. And she can't bring herself to do it. So she stays. And almost immediately she regrets it. Like the next day she regrets it. But she doesn't know where, Jeremiah's gone. And so she's kind of stuck. So anyways, now that she's fast forward, she's talked to Simon Jordan. She's laid her story out. Jeremiah comes back for her. He comes back for her as Jerome Dupont. He wants to come and help her. So he had told her originally to run away with him so that they could do a little trick show, that she could pretend like she's being possessed, in a seance. And he tells her how to do it and how he'd put a cloth over her head. And so when he shows up again as Dr. Jerome Dupont, he's a hypnotist. He's a doctor in hypnotism. And so he does this with her and in front of this whole crowd of people because they really want her to be innocent. So they do this little show, and in this show it's kind of crazy because she becomes somebody else. Like, he really hypnotizes her and she becomes somebody completely different. She becomes Mary Whitney. Mary Whitney, in the book and in the movie, when she died, when Mary Whitney died in both the book and the movie, Grace doesn't open the window in time. And Mary's telling her, let me in. And she's like, no, surely she meant let me out. But it leads you to believe that she was possessed. So every time these men would feel like she was coming on to them, or she was interested in them, or she was being promiscuous, it was Mary Whitney doing these things. And Grace wouldn't remember because Mary Whitney would take her over at that time. Because she spends many years in prison. I mean, she gets out. In the movie, she still looks pretty young, but in the book, she's like 40 something by the time she gets out of prison. And when she gets out of prison, they take her to go meet Jamie Walsh. Jamie Walsh was this young boy. He wasn't much younger than her. He was only like a couple of years younger than her, but he was still considered a boy at the time. And he would help out at Thomas Kinnear's house. His father and him lived on the farm there, and they would help, Thomas Kinnear with his farm and help him. And he really, really liked Grace. He even told her that he wanted to grow up and marry her, and she was like, well, I'll consider it, but right now you're just a boy. So when she was in court, he's actually one of the reasons that she went to prison, because they told him, you need to say this, and he did what they told him to say. And she ended up in prison because he kind of turned the jury against her. But when she's released, he has her come to him and he begs her, please forgive me. I've got a home. I'm not a rich man, but I have a home. You can live here comfortably, and she eventually agrees to stay with him and forgive him. One thing I really liked about the book is that it ends on a positive note. She actually ends up marrying Jamie Walsh. And in the movie, it shows them old with no children. And it's kind of sad because he's like, forgive me, tell me again. He, like the doctor and like the lawyer, was somehow attracted to her vulnerability. But in the movie, it's kind of like a sad existence. I mean, she's got peace, she's got the farm, whatever. They're married, no children. It's just kind of a lonely home, a lonely existence, but at least it's a peaceful, free existence. But in the book, they get married. She manages to make her quilts the same way she did in the movie, but she sees Jerome Dupont one more time. He's an actor. And when she sees him, he kind of like nods to her, and she's like, yeah, like so excited because she sees him, but not enough that her husband will notice. And it's just kind of like closing that gap. He was there. He was the first one to tell her that things were going to go bad. He was there on her journey as things went bad. He tried to warn her before they did. He was there when things were bad to try to help her out there. And at the end, seeing him one more time was just kind of like going full circle. But anyways, beyond that, her and Jamie, I thought it was really sweet because at the end, she's like, we're expecting our first child. And she's like so excited because she's going to have a baby. And it was something that she didn't think she could have for herself. And I just thought that was such a sweet ending. I think I love the ending to the book so much more than the movie. Overall, it was a really good story. It was a really good TV show. I highly recommend it, and I hope you all like it. That's all I have to say about that. So if you like what you heard, please comment below. If you have any other comments you want to make about the book, if I missed something, I really want to talk to you all and see what you all think about it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell for more great content. I'll see you all next time. Bye.